sovereignty. There are so many ways to understand sovereignty, or maybe only one, but a lot of usages. And the concept is, okay, we are building resilient data ecosystems. What about how to balance the open science, the open data, with those capabilities within some boundaries? It could be a country, could be a company. And in the context of infrastructure that some people would love to have more open, some people would not. And all the roadmaps of the organizations, companies. So there are three questions about what is sovereign AI, if you think that is worth talking about that. We know that there is a big challenge on budgets and speed about the companies that are literally pouring infinite amount of money in to develop these AI-based solutions and platforms. So can we, because I mean, you will realize that there is no one from NVIDIA, Apple, OpenAI here. They are just busy making money or building stuff or sleeping 1 hour per night. So is there a need to regulate AI? Is it worth it? I mean, it was a discussion a year or two ago about guys from one side, scientists signing other thing. Now, regulation, and the European Union has an act from 1 or 2 years ago. I mean, this regulation is an innovation engine or is a limitation? And do you have any idea about what responsible computing is? And by responsible computing, there are some definitions here and there. There are even syllabus in certain universities about, okay, we need to do this and that. So I do the analogy of responsible computing about, I mean, computing have been around for a number of decades. And my analogy is with cars. The golden era of V8 cars of the 50s where fossil fuels were unlimited, and that was the way of the future. Well, guess what? It didn't end well, or it's not ending well. So are we in something similar in computing? So this is just a high-level conversation that I invited these distinguished panelists for a number of reasons. If you look at Ilkay Eltintas, her talk will be related to this. Manish is actually speaking on this as well. Plus, Deidre cares about the environment, if it's a very simplified way to say your background into this. And Emily works in statistics that hopefully will put all these numbers together. But this is the moment when I just say, this is the introduction to the panel. All yours. Someone needs to start. Manish.
Okay, you want us to comment on these questions?
Yes.
Okay, so I think there are a lot of very different overlapping concepts out here. Sovereign AI, the idea is to build AI where you have control on how AI is developed, how it evolves, how it is governed, how it's used, and there could be many reasons for it. It could be technical independence, political reasons, privacy reasons, right? Companies not wanting to be dependent, wanting to control how their models evolve, making sure they have access to the models in spite of different economic or political situations, right? So there is definitely aspects of this and of sovereign AI, and there is a paradox between open data, right? By sovereign AI, right? Because AI depends on data, you tend to isolate the data, create a data silo where you are protecting your data, right? And so there's a conflict between having open data and sovereign AI. And that has implications, right? You can only make so much data a silo, that's the thing. So you are limiting the quality of your model. Issues of tracking provenance of the data, you've siloed it. If you're copying data over, data evolves. You have data that's either outdated, you cannot track it, so it affects trustworthiness, correctness, responsible aspects of the AI that you create using that data. So that's, there's an inherent conflict there. Responsible computing, at least the way I understand it, it's about computing or any technology, using it in a responsible way, developing it in a responsible way with AI, it is making sure that the AI itself is trustworthy, transparent, reliable, privacy preserving, ethical, unbiased, all these nice attributes we talk about. And that means that, and the other aspect is it is developed in a way that is not impacting the environment. And so there's whole dimensions to responsible computing, responsible AI, computing context of AI. And there again, right, there are conflicts in the quality of AI and how it's developed, and we are dealing with it. And I think there are at least three dimensions. One is the technology itself. How do I develop the technology? Can I have the right guardrails? Can I make sure my models are explainable? Do I have traceability? Right, so that's one aspect of it. The second one is what framework they're built in from the governance, right? What is the regulatory framework? What is the policy? What is, how do I make sure it's governed in a way that's responsible? But I think from a responsible perspective, I think there's also the usage perspective, right? Do I have an educated, knowledgeable user community that knows how to use it responsibly, right? It's a tool, and it's never going to be perfect as a tool. Right? So if you use it as a tool, you want to make sure who's using it is using it in a responsible way, understanding the limitations. Right? So if you want to do responsible AI, you have to at least have these three dimensions. I'm going to stop there and see what my other panelists think, and be happy to take other questions.
So great comments. And to add to the definition of the sovereign AI, I agree it's the capability of an entity to develop, operate, deploy AI. And it's really in the sovereign context. It needs to be aligned with the laws and data and needs of that particular entity. And the goal here, as Manish said, is not isolation, putting data in silos or AIs in silos, but to have control and governance over the critical layers, and also maybe deployment of the public infrastructure as it relates to that sovereign entity. And the second question was building, can others than the big data companies build hyperscalers? I think the answer is yes, but not in the way that big tech builds hyperscalers. I think in a public context, there are more of, we can do this differently. My talk will be about what I call societal computing, using computing in the context of society, along with a few other aspects of that. And the goal here is, in essence, should be, let's federate, not centralize. Let's figure out models of that collaboration and partnership with hyperscalers, and also create an open ecosystem that specializes AIs and data and use of those into specialized domain-specific contexts, especially in the context of science and use of science in the societal scale. So the stewardship of the data and those AIs in the context of those collaborations would, I think, be a great way to interpret hyperscalers in the context of public. Is there a need to regulate AI? Yes. But how do we do that? Right? The goal shouldn't be regulating technology. Regulating technology never works. Regulating the context technology is deployed is important. So I think we need to bring more context to the regulation of AI. So I'm thinking of, for instance, aviation industry had regulations which enabled safety and trust. Internet had standards for interoperability. We had financial regulations that actually increased trust in the system. So we need to think of AI in this context, and we need to evaluate what are high-risk deployments of AI, and can we actually regulate those industries, not AI itself. And thinking of data and rights around data, who has access and ownership and governance over data, and what are the market concentrations that need this type of data to be available to them. I think that really helps with that regulation around risks and impact. We want impact in the end by regulate, but at the same time regulate the risks. And then I think we have, which would be your ideal model for responsible computing? I think responsible data and transparent models. Easy to say, hard to do. That would be my definition of it. Also, deployment of the AIs and data in the sense that how can we make the deployment accountable and inclusive? That would be another aspect of things around responsibility. And a little bit advertisement for Manisha's talk tomorrow. We've been working on a platform in the US called the National Data Platform. This federation and governance around the federated aspects and their use has been the focus, and I'm sure we'll hear some interesting things on that.
Emily.
Okay, so thank you for letting me be on this panel. I'm going to echo a lot of what was already said, which I guess should encourage me to go first next time. So in terms of sovereign AI and the need for it, I think private entities probably can't compete with what big tech has done in terms of like general purpose models. But I do agree that these specialized models for specialized industries is where we can make more of a contribution. So in my talk, I will talk about using metrics and testing and evaluation of AI models and how it needs to be very specific to the domain. And so I also think that goes along with kind of the regulation. The regulation of these models should be very specific to the domain, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. I think that that's kind of what we found in the evaluation of these models. Using MSE for everything, for training and for evaluating, isn't always good enough. It doesn't answer the question that you're trying to answer. And so I think that that's the same for regulation. Regulation can't be a one-size-fits-all for all of the models that will come out. Yeah, I think that's that.
Thanks. Testing, yep, that works. Yeah, so I mean, I come at the AI perspective from quite an applied angle, and so I guess to me, you know, AI sovereignty means developing models, I guess, that reflect the kind of values of a particular group. So that could be anything from kind of the data going in, privacy, like being mentioned, and I guess even to what the AI is actually being used for, you know, and how it's being applied. An example, kind of, I do a bit of work in flood forecasting, and I think that kind of has an example of this sort of push and pull that we come across. So, you know, we have Google released a flood hub, which was, you know, a global model for predicting river flow forecasts. Works really well, and it allows, you know, there's some countries that don't have flood forecasting at all, and this now can give, you know, flow forecasts for those regions. But if you try and apply it to New Zealand and compare it to some of our accurate models, it's actually, you know, pretty rubbish, because our rivers respond in a very different way. We've got a lot of rain, as you might have seen, and kind of some really flashy rivers, and they just respond differently, and it's actually not really fit for purpose for what we need. So, you know, we will always need to be able to develop something that is catered to the New Zealand context. Having said that, you know, the issue that we're coming across at the moment is that different regional councils around New Zealand have all individually, in their kind of own little silos, developed flood models that have a very, you know, individual to them. And what that means is that there's some councils that have more money and more technology and more expertise, meaning that the level of forecasting that you have available to you is very different across the country. So that doesn't seem right either. You know, you should have some sort of consistent approach. So we're actually now in the process of hoping to try and grab all the different data from the different councils to develop one sort of national model. So I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, there's kind of a push-pull here where, you know, maybe there is some sort of world where you have a foundational model available to all that's then catered to the different needs of each different region or something like that. I don't know. In terms of regulation, I mean, this kind of application for something like hazards is very different from kind of a sort of, you know, LLM that's available, you know, to everybody. So we think about it, I guess, in a slightly different context where as the model's developed, it's regulated in a sense by kind of who's exposed to the model, So to begin with, we're only really making it available to people who are used to seeing these sorts of models, and so that it becomes almost a kind of a communication challenge where you're trying to present a model with some sort of flood forecast or something like that, but you need to communicate to your audience what the limitations and biases and things are. And that's easy for people that are used to dealing with flood models and they understand the different contexts and the different challenges. It would be very different if we started making this available to everybody on their phones, to be interpreting in terms of whether or not they need to be evacuating their homes. And how we would regulate something like that would be a whole different challenge. So I don't have the answers for that, but I guess that kind of graduated approach is kind of how we would think about things in terms of a regulation.
So, yes, thank you very much. I mean, in some way, Deidre, your answer was within the three points that Manish put on the, because I take notes, I listen. So, but I like a couple of comments from Ilkay and as well from Emily, but this is the first panel of the first day. Can you be a little bit more controversial? Can you be, it's full of nice words, I love it, very polite. Now, what can possibly go wrong? Or what is already going wrong? Your example about Google versus New Zealand rivers. Yes, okay, now elaborate further. How wrong this thing will keep going? Or on the other hand, Manish, your wonderful framework, which is framework and tech and the best use, is anyone paying attention to that? The audience, I cannot see very well with the lights here. Are they being too polite or not addressing the full point? So allow me to say it in French. When is going the shit hit the fan? What's happening here? What could possibly go wrong? And from now on? What? Say it again, in English? It was English. Okay, or Turkish. So please.
I think one thing that can go wrong, and one of the arguments for sovereign AI is that OpenAI and Anthropic fold and take their models with them. So if we have those not available to those models, or if they decide they don't want to play with certain people and they cut off their ability to use them, then shit would hit the fan for some people.
Yeah. Is anyone in the audience? Yes, Anna. Where's the microphone? Is there someone running with a mic? Yes, there we go.
I think it can go much worse than that, right? They can influence elections, these models. Whoever controls them has a huge power. So my question to you is, who should regulate them? Because politicians move extremely slow. They don't really understand what they have. I do agree with you, Ilkay, that it shouldn't be the developers, but we know better what the dangers are.
We always know better.
Yeah. Like, let's say we have a self-driving car, and the way that the algorithm behaves is, in a situation, the AI has to choose between running over a child or going into traffic and causing 100 people dying or going to the hospital. The algorithm will choose one. Who is responsible for choosing the wrong answer?
I can give you an answer to that. It was Multicore World 2016, maybe, Mark. You remember Paul Fenwick? So, Perl guy, open source guy. He set up that question 10 years ago. You have a self-driving car arriving to an intersection. Grandma is crossing with the two kids. There is, I don't know, a big electrified wall to the right, or there is a cliff to the left. What's the autonomous driver decide? Commit car suicide, kill the grandma, kill the kids, crash itself against the wall, therefore having another collateral damage?
And with humans, we have laws that define. Right?
Well, the answer is the insurance company. I would love to have a lawyer in the room.
I wanted to say,
Patricia.
I wanted to ask him, I don't know your name, sorry. Yeah, You know which AI was, but you don't know where this AI is coming from. So you can apply all the law you want to that, but it doesn't have anything to lose. It's just data. So how do you really make AI responsible for something?
So are you talking about this word, the chats, the collection of chats this way that they are, anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that in most of those situations, there's usually someone that is responsible for the operation of the platform or the AI, and it will sheet home to that person in most of our legal situations. I guess the question, so for example, if it's a car that's being driven around by Waze or whoever happens to have the self-driving car, then it will sheet home to one of the operators or the company itself, right?
Yeah. So who is held responsible? Is it the company that built the car? Did they use software from another company? Is it a software development company? You said the insurance company will eventually be liable, but which insurance company? Is it the software? Is it the hardware? Did the user somehow say something to spur an action? I mean, these are all kind of open-ended questions that AI brings to the table, which is different than just a user driving their car and runs somebody over, heaven forbid.
Okay, you only have 2 microphones and there are 200 hands. So let's go with Chris, which has a microphone, and then...
So to return to the topic of the panel, which is sovereignty, it may be that the driver of the car is the liable person in one jurisdiction, and the operator of the AI is the liable person in some other jurisdiction, and some other countries, some other sovereign entities may have different values to us. So maybe it's okay to run over the granny in some countries and never the children, and maybe it's vice versa in countries with different demographics. So that was more of a comment than a question, so I apologise. So I'll reframe the sovereignty thing as a question. And I'm going to try and avoid stepping on panel 4, which has got more to say about this in terms of equality of access across different nations. But how do we deal with access, particularly with, say you were the Cook Islands and you can't afford a hyperscaler of your own, but you want some AI that's appropriate to the Cook Islands. How do we deal with that?
So let's do a round from the floor and then back to the panel. So Shane.
Yeah. So just to circle around to the self-driving car thing a little bit more, how do we deal with people? So when a person is given access to a vehicle, how do we deal with them if they have an accident? Or how are they even allowed to drive the car? They get a driving license, don't they? And so, yes, that person licensed is responsible. So for an AI to do something, I think it needs licensing as well. So we have to treat the AI more like it's a person doing whatever it's doing. And so the AI becomes responsible, because there are going to be self-driving cars that don't have a person in them at all. So how exactly do you blame the person that's driving when there is nobody driving? It is an AI. So I think you've got to look at the AI as the driver itself. And the same thing happens for a lot of other things. I mean, we use large language models quite a lot. What if that large language model tells us something that's maybe, I don't know, we think maybe this is a great idea, this might be patentable, but it's derived it from training data that it's been given for somebody else. This happens in music, for instance. I mean, does anybody remember Men at Work with, what if the AI generates something that we think is terribly unique and we then run with that, and then somebody else comes along and says, hey, that's just stolen from my thing? You're starting to get into some really interesting legal questions about who is responsible. Is the person who originally trained the model responsible, or is the user responsible? And so this again goes back to the self-driving car. Is the user responsible, or is the car itself responsible, or is the company that made the model responsible? It just kind of stacks up, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it reminds me of Napster or Mega, but that's a different story. Amal. No.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I had this discussion with a lawyer about, okay, we have a self-driving car who's responsible for some stupid action that might be happening at some point. And from his point of view, it's going to be the company who sold the car, because it's its responsibility to test the quality of the car while assembling everything, which means the hardware, the software, the AI, and everything else. So that's just his point of view. And maybe to feed to the things that might go wrong. So I don't know if you heard about this AI agent social media, where only agents are exchanging ideas, thoughts, talking about topics. They also created their own religion. Anyway, so it could go very wrong. Like
okay,
in
so
very
I
different
will
ways.
bring back to the panel, and I will friendly challenge you, panelists, to be bold, because who of you mentioned self-driving cars, which has been people talking for the last 5 minutes. So as a moderator, I'm very happy. Please, who wants to speak first?
Volunteer.
Can go. A lot of exciting questions. I think we're still figuring a lot of these things. On the self-driving car, it's not as simple as you say, right? I mean, there is a number of disclaimers and warnings that you get, right? So did the user take responsibility? Did the car owner have disclosures before you decided to use the self-driving feature? Did the car manufacturer, when they put in the model, did they get some guarantees from the company that, right? So it's complicated, but the regulatory space is interesting, and that's something that I'm very interested in, and I follow that a lot. There is a bunch of different models. Clearly, there's no answer, right? There's a lot of people figuring this out, right? There is risk-based models. There are models that try to regulate the technology, the development of the technology, the use of the technology, the impact of the technology, just locally, right? In the US, it's a wild thing. There's no overarching framework like the EU, where it's a risk-based model, which I can comment on as well. But in the US, every state is trying to figure it out. And we have very different things. They're like 40 different models are there. And so if you're a company trying to work across the different states in the US, you're in big trouble, right? In Utah, in the legislative session that's going on right now, there are 142 different bills that are being proposed to regulate AI.
Right. Sorry.
And they're trying to balance innovation with regulation. They're trying to balance technology development. If I'm building a model that has, this thing, do I have a disclosure when it can involve impact on humans? Do I have a disclosure, right? So do I create a risk that trying to regulate the different aspects of developing models and different applications? I'm doing a companion chatbot. What do I do? If I am developing images, what do I have to declare, right? So there's a whole bunch of things like that. One thing that's interesting that has evolving in a number of different states is this idea of regulatory sandboxes. They say, look, we cannot have a one-size regulation that fits all, right? So they try to create these sandboxes where within the sandbox you get regulatory mitigation so that you can assess the risk and build a customized regulatory framework for that application. Because these are evolving so fast and can't imagine what the applications or users could be, right? So it's a really complex space that's really exciting to see how they're trying to figure out. But just to go back to your point, Anna, things are moving very fast. I said they're 140, right? There's so much interest in trying to regulate, but nobody really knows what the right framework is, right? So it's an interesting time to have this conversation.
Well, Ilka, you were taking a lot of notes.
I was, for whatever it's worth. I agree that in an ideal world, it would be the application that's regulated. But in a world that we don't have much knowledge of what's in those models. They're not transparent enough. Application will always take the risk. And all use of AI right now has huge risks, and we all take it and move on with it, even at the individual scale. You know, we say sovereignty is on the nation or organization, but at the individual scale, we are sovereign around our own decisions. And if we involve AI in it, is it still our decision? It sort of feels like the same question, actually. Yes, it is, because in the individual scale, if we are using AI, we are taking the risk. We should be responsible from how we use it. But of course, when it's so widespread and there are models that are not, we don't know what's in them, you know, I think none of us know what risk we are taking when we use them. So not to just create as is, right? Even at that inspirational level. Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing I kind of was taking notes on is we shouldn't be, I think, confusing in responsibility what's ethical and what's legal. I think there are lots of things the law allows that might not be exactly ethical. So, you know, where do we draw the line between those? And, or, you know, ethical and sovereign versus legal, those are different discussions to have. And I think AI industry definitely should be responsible for some of the mess, because, and I think that's gonna, in an ideal world, if I can sort of project forward, and this is spur of the moment thinking maybe, but applications will have their needs because they'll be held responsible in the sandbox approach. And I think they should start demanding some standards from the tech industry to give as guarantees and sort of some measures of safety.
Emily, any comment?
So I tend to think about everything from like an evaluation testing perspective. And so you build to the metric that you're designing against. And so, you know, we live in a capitalist society, and these companies are not going to have an incentive to install regulations unless it hurts their bottom line. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, until there's some financial incentive to put time and effort towards regulations, to implementing regulations, to coming up with regulations, like if they're not going to be financially injured by taking out the grandma and the kids and causing an accident, then they're not going to. And so, yeah, I think that's just the society that we live in. And so, yeah, that's...
So, Deirdre, from the point of view of New Zealand, we are at the end of the world. Can we be at the front of the world in taking a principled approach?
Yeah.
It's not just AI, also any industry. Right? We live in a wildfire-prone area in California, or a lot of the places around the world, and insurance is changing. And a lot of the time, insurance companies are relying on models that are not exactly explainable. Not just AI, right? This could be also, there's very little benchmark and transparency built into these models. As we are discussing data-driven insurability, for instance, or AI-driven insurability, this becomes a huge challenge, because who is the loss and benefit on? You know, people who are getting insurance, I'm breaking the decor.
It's insured, don't worry.
Great. Is it data-driven? So this is, like, I think in California, for instance, state level, we are developing some standards for catastrophe models, at least what they should be disclosed when insurance companies are using it. So we are approaching it collectively in terms of what models can be used. And then it goes down from that to all the companies who provide these catastrophe models.
Are the models and the AI models are black boxes forever? Or do we expect that one day we will be able to dig into? I mean, I've been a tech entrepreneur since I was young and handsome, once upon a time. At the time, to me, the biggest high tech that I did was have a calculator to extract the square root with one click. Because believe me, I made a lot of money in the late 70s by teaching high school students how to extract a square root manually. How hundreds of years people used to do that. Technology keep advancing. I want to pick on what Anna said about politicians not knowing something or anything. It's not necessarily that true. They put things together in a way that the society accepts or not. I had a discussion being a dot-com survivor 30 years ago about regulation. And one lawyer told me he had no clue what I was talking about, but he said, well, we always come after you, and we pick up the pieces. And it's not necessarily from the capital side of things or the social. I mean, the law needs to get in a way that serves the society, and that definition changed with time. I mean, high tech 600 years ago was to challenge that the earth was flat, that sort of thing. So the purpose of this panel to me was, let's take a step back or a step further in, we are building these things, we are challenging these things. Are we looking at what these things do for us, for the others? So that's a question that I want to leave here. So any opinion to close? Manish, you always have opinions.
I wanted to bring another concept that we are thinking a lot about, which is around AI neutrality. Right? There are only so many frontier models, and there's scope for only so many. And there are many document cases where access to those can be used as a business competitive advantage, right? So, so from a regulatory perspective, is there a way to provide regulatory framework where you're guaranteed certain access to these foundational models? Right now, we know what happened to net neutrality, and so it's an interesting conversation. But it's relevant to some of the question or point that was made around access to it. So there's a lot of debate going on right now around that, and happy to talk more about it.
Who is debating it?
Pardon?
Who is debating? I mean, science, general public, the vendors?
It is coming out more from the regulatory and watchdog groups that are bringing this up. And of course, academics are supporting it a lot. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, a lot of the big tech players are opposing it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's an interesting point about the watchdogs, because I mean, we used to have, I don't know, the Electronics Frontiers Foundation, EFF, that sort of entities that has been always around, Linux, I can't remember even, my bad. But these days we have a lot of watchdogs what are aligned with, I mean, lobby has existed always. How do we distinguish? We are living in the era of fake news, for better or worse. Doesn't matter if you agree who defined it or not. So why would, I was going to ask Eva, not sure if she is still in the room, about why she picked Claude for everything that she did with Pegasus. Do you have a framework to choose, okay, my agent AI should do this and this and this? Instead, or for example, Stuart, I asked him, look, you started to do this with Rust 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Would you do it in the same way today with all the capability? Everything happens so fast. Who we trust? What is trust? Yeah, oh, wow. Mark. Sorry, no, Jess is already.
I was just going to say just a couple of things. So one, I think just separate the sovereign AI from the regulation, I think, because they're two separate issues. I'm going to answer my previous question because no one really came up with the answer when we started talking about self-driving cars. I think one of the real challenges with AI is very human-like. And it's almost like a counterfeit. And so part of the problem that we have actually are things like misinformation, believability. You know, you're seeing users interact with these things, and we've already had kids commit suicide using AI. And so there are very real harms with the fact that these things are almost so human. It seems to trigger something that maybe we want to think about protecting people from those harms in particular. I think given the fact that we haven't properly regulated social media and a few of those things, I don't hold out much hope for that. I think on the sovereign side, though, I guess the kind of the question for me is like, what can you do? I mean, thinking about it from the New Zealand perspective, you know, what can we do to tell OpenAI to piss off, right? I mean, we're a tiny little country in the middle of nowhere. And so the question for me is like, if you're going to set these rules up, how are you going to enforce them? Do you actually have the tools that mean you can kind of fix these things, or is this just going to be like we're setting up some regulation that's never going to be enforced and is just going to make us a bit of a laughing stock? And I think that's quite a hard thing to get around, really.
Mark?
Parts of that are quite a good segue to what I've been sitting here wanting to say. Really, since Ilkay said we've got to regulate context, and then I've been listening to all of the conversations since, and it's really almost everything is assumed that there's some industry to go after, right? But in what context is deep fakes for election interference and deep fakes for, revenge porn okay? And what industries do we go after to deal with those things, right? I'll give you my opinion and then I'll ask yours. Going after industries or saying whoever's enabling this follows the war on terror. We're just going to go after everything and everyone's a criminal if they have played any part along the way, right?
If you are not with me, that's a war on terror.
I don't think that the war on terror approach can work. What I think potentially can work is enabling, I'll say, privacy preserving and accountability enabling filtering of content. So we can imagine that every piece of content on all regulable social media things has to come along with a proof that this person can be held accountable, even though their identity is not necessarily revealed or is not revealed unless they misbehave. And you could imagine requirements for those being built into browsers. So that would not stop people doing all of these terrible things, but it would greatly stop them propagating.
If I can blurt out an answer to that, I think social media in this case should be to blame, right? The context of some of those things is not just social media, in media, how those adversarial AIs actually disseminate is through the profit-driven use by media. And that regulation right now does not exist, or any regulation creates a negative sort of response. Right now, I mean, this is, again, a personal opinion at best, but I think when I said context, that's exactly what I mean, right? How are you going to use it in the context of what? And of course, I could convince myself the other way around in another point of view there. And I was just writing down, right, what world we are living in. So in positive moments, when I think of, what will happen is, I feel like open and transparent will win. So the demand of the society to ask for better transparency, at least, or better benchmarks, metrics around use of AI will overcome the profit sort of cycle that's going on around it right now. And maybe that will be higher than the existing models. But when I think of, in a negative moment, the alternative of that is the spread of AI deployment right now is so fast. It changes almost the world order. It's going to be so rapid, leave any transparency behind, and all of the things we are discussing right now will have a different definition in that world. And I think we are fast going to the negative end. Right now, all these people actually quitting the AI industry because they know something is not a good sign.
Ben?
Is that controversial enough?
Let's see.
Hello?
Yes.
So I want to kind of go back to the politicians. As was said earlier, they don't know what AI is. So how do they even know how to regulate or what to regulate? And so what would we recommend to them, and I've heard a couple of different aspects today. One is kind of on the social impact of people using AI and large language models just in general, and then how would you regulate that? But the other part is like the autonomous driving cars. That's just one example. AI is going to make decisions, and then those decisions are going to be done by something. And my whole last 5 years has been in autonomous, building autonomous laboratories. So I'm on this spectrum of using AI to do something. So should we say, all right, there's got to be regulations in what AI can do in the physical world as well as the social world? And I don't know what the answer is, but that's kind of the open-ended question, is what should we be saying to the politicians, because we're supposed to be the experts in this field to some extent.
Go ahead.
I would have thought there'd be a few kind of low-hanging fruit on that front. I mean, something like age verification is one that, for me, would be one that would go in. I mean, I've got, thinking about my children and all the wealth of information out there, and coupled with kind of, what we were talking about before was making me think a lot about education. I mean, one of the kind of things would be just to get the public more aware of what these AI models are actually doing, and the biases that exist, and the information that you're getting, and how well trusted it can be, and the traps that they may fall into. Because again, in that kind of on the good day, what I hope might happen is that, if you have enough education around the kind of traps of these sorts of models, then maybe, enough people will start leaning towards a model where you have a bit more information or a bit more control over the bias, or you have some better filters for your children, or, whatever it might be, and they start choosing that, and then all of a sudden you have a slightly more, for the greater good sort of approach. So, I mean, I would have thought a couple of low-hanging fruit, like age verification, having the AI identify itself as AI if you are talking to an AI, for, your grandma who might not know, for example, or, those are the two I can think of right now, but I'm sure there are others.
I would propose that we finish here and continue over dinner, because considering that I rented a bus, I want all of you on that bus as soon as possible. So let's thank the panelists for prompting this.